Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa, haere mai ki tēnei hui. Te iwi o rangatane, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Welcome everybody to our Arts, Culture and Heritage meeting of the 14th of April. Lovely to see you here and to hear everybody's enthusiasm for this session as you gather today. We are live on the internet for the purposes of notice that you, just so that you know that. So the meeting is being live streamed and recorded. It will be on the council's website if you want to go back and review what happened. The health and safety requirements of this building will appear, there you go, in front of us for fire and emergency, for health and safety. Most of you are very familiar with this facility, so I won't read those out, but we will just note if there are any near misses or incidents, please report those to the committee administrator who will deal with that. Councillors and presenters, it's important for the live stream and recording that your names are made public. So elected members, that's normal. You'll be invited to speak, so you don't need to give your own name. But for our presenters, if you could introduce yourselves and whoever is joining you if they come up to answer a question. That's especially important to you because all the screen can see is the back of your head. So say your name and then people watching will know who you are. And also I will read the motion that we're putting, which sounds quite cumbersome when you're here in person, but is for the benefit of the recording. So that is all of the housekeeping. We will move to the first item on the agenda, which is apologies. I apologise for the long list of apologies. The committee resolved the apologies be received from the Mayor absent on council business, Councillor Alicia Rutherford, late arrival, Councillors Leonie Harper and Brent Barrett, early departure, Councillors Lou Finlay and Susan Beattie. And I'll note, in apologising for the apologies, that we are in a very busy time of council with consultation events going on around, and several of those elected members are moving on to meetings that are happening later. Are there anything else to add?
Yes,
Councillor Butt.
same as Councillor Barrett.
Yes.
Early departure, please.
So, and I think those will both be on council business. Early departure on council business. Thank you. So we will add those. I will move those, seconded by Councillor Barrett. And once we have, the typing in, then we will look to vote on that. Thank you. Thank you. Carried unanimously. I have no notification of additional items or any declarations of interest. So I'll move to item 4, which is public comment. I'm not advised of any, and you all look like you are here for purposes of making presentations, so I'm not expecting any there. Although I will add that it's usually our practice at Arts, Culture and Heritage to receive a presentation from a community group, and you will see that there is not one on your agenda. But today, we're taking a slightly different approach to that. Many of you, I hope all of you will know that Te Manawa has been recognised as the first museum in Aotearoa, New Zealand to be acknowledged for taking into account the needs of people with dementia, and they received that recognition from Alzheimer's New Zealand. In that recognition, the work of one particular staff member, Prue, was mentioned with her Museum in a Box piece of work. And so, when we break for afternoon tea, we'll take a slightly extended break, and Prue has set up one of her museums in a box. I don't want the plural of that, museums in a box, in the councillor lounge for us to have a look at. So we thought that was a more effective way of receiving that presentation rather than having her come and speak to it. But I do want to note that I would have been delighted to receive that presentation formally, and we do recognise the very good work of Te Manawa in that space. We might talk about that later. So there aren't any presentations today. There is no public comment. We'll move to item 5, which is confirmation of the minutes. The committee resolved that the minutes of the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee meeting of 17 February 2021, Part 1 Public, be confirmed as a true and correct record. I will move that, seconded by Councillor Barrett, and I will seek any corrections to those minutes, please. There being none, we will put that to the vote. Councillor Dennison. Got it. Councillor McLeod. Have you voted? Thank you. 10 in favour with 1 abstention, nobody against. Thank you very much. And so we move on to the meat of today's business, which is hearing from our council-controlled organisations. And thank you all so much for being with us in person today. Very much appreciated. We've taken a slightly different approach to these reports. You might see that different approach in your order paper, in that it's been the way we've dealt with it in the past is to do a group report for all the CCOs. But actually we've taken the approach from now on that we're going to separate those out. So we'll hear individually from each of our CCOs. There'll be opportunities for questions to that CCO and comments on that CCO before we move to the next one. And we're starting with the Regent Theatre Trust. So I will invite the representatives of the Regent Theatre, which is David Walsh, General Manager, and Susan McConaughey, Board Member, to come forward. And I'll also invite Hannah White, our Governance Manager, to come and just speak to an administrative matter before we get into the presentation. So, Hannah, if I could ask you to comment first, please. Elected members, this relates to an email you received earlier today.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The message that the Chair is referring to was sent to you on Monday, councillors. It is an administrative error, and I'd like to just speak for the record that there is a comment on the top of page 20 in table 3 that specifies in the table with regard to financials, and that comment has been printed in error. It shouldn't be there, so I'd like to remove it. And as a consequence, you will note on the screen that when we move, table 4, when we move recommendation 3, that is noted as amended, that comment be removed. My apologies for that error being printed.
Thank you, Hannah. Just very important that our public documents actually are correct. So I appreciate Hannah taking the time to make sure that is noted through. So, David and Susan, thank you so much for being with us today. You are presenting your 6-month performance report. So, over to you.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou, tēnei tātou katoa. You stole my thunder. I was actually going to introduce who is our now General Manager and no longer acting. And just to say, he's only been in the position for 4 months. 4 weeks. Well, that's a good start. Okay, and he has actually filled in, as you know, on many occasions when things have just not gone quite as we had expected. So we are just so grateful that he is here and is so knowledgeable and has taken over the reins for us. So I'm going to pass over to David.
Good afternoon. First off is apologies from our Chairman and Deputy Chairman, which is David Lee and Mark Mabbott, who are both out of town today, so they can't be here. So it's me reporting to you on the 6-month review and the SOI for the region of Broadway, with both of these documents being prepared prior to my appointment. I can say that during the first 3 months of our trading for this financial year, I was warming the chair, so I have a little understanding as to where we're at and where we should be. 2 major issues have influenced our results: COVID and the ticketing debacle. Although all the changes in management hasn't helped in the day-to-day running of the theatre as well. The COVID effect has had a dramatic impact on our business during these first 6 months of trading and still continues to haunt us. We may have been in level 1 during the start of the year, but our advanced bookings had already suffered, with over 35 shows and events cancelled or postponed to new dates. 35 shows. Shows like the Royal New Zealand Ballet, school productions, speech competitions, school prize givings, sports prize givings, graduations, the Top Twins concert are just some examples of what didn't happen during this 6-month period of COVID. The Palmerston North Operatic Society, trading as Act 3 Productions and the Region on Broadway Promotions, successfully staged Sister Act. However, it wasn't all plain sailing, as although we opened the season on the 7th of August and closed the season on the 5th of September, we only had 11 performances because of COVID. Shows were cancelled, shows were rescheduled, tickets were refunded, tickets were exchanged for new performance, so this kept us all very busy and on our toes. When we remained in level 2 during this production, we were only allowed to have a maximum capacity of 100 people. So we became very creative during this time. By working with Act 3 Productions, we divided the theatre into 4 quadrants, each with its own separate entrance, toilet facilities, etc., which allowed us to commence performances to a maximum people of 400. With the help of our local MP at the time, this idea was approved from the Department of the Prime Minister. Or was it? We sent them our plans, and the advice we got back was, well, we can see they're doing nothing wrong, so we took that as we're doing it right. So during level 2, we were the only theatre in New Zealand, and possibly the world at that stage, to have a show on stage playing to a live audience. This innovation has given Act 3 Productions and ourselves a number of awards from within the industry. Although we can pat ourselves on the back for being so creative, and Act 3 showing a small profit, the total revenue was only 50% of what we had achieved from the previous year's production. This naturally has had a financial implication on our revenue, which currently is down 24% on budget and 53% on the previous year's revenue. The ticket rocket issue has not only impacted on us, but also our patrons and our promoters who hire our venue. We're still in confidential negotiations with these promoters, trying to reach a satisfactory outcome on shows that are still to occur. This, of course, comes with more financial implications. So what with COVID and ticketing, and then our GM resigned, the board has been a little busy and maybe a little stressed, not to mention the new GM. However, there is good news. As we look ahead to the next 6 months of trading, that's the January to June period, this is looking much brighter. Although our borders are still closed, we have been fortunate to secure a number of amazing events that would not have happened pre-COVID. Shows such as Crowded House, which we secured last year. We were the only theatre in New Zealand that they performed in, as all the other venues were arenas or outdoor venues. And it was pleasing to note that when the 3 big rigs pulled up at the venue on the morning, the one that was carrying all the sound system was immediately sent to the new venue, as our sound system had the capacity and quality that was needed for a show such as this. So we say thank you to the council who helped us with this project. We had a capacity house, which was great for our revenue. However, this event was not without COVID issues. As Auckland went into lockdown, this tour was rescheduled from its original dates, which meant we had to refund ticket holders who couldn't make it to the new performance. But as quick as we were refunding, they were being on-sold almost immediately. Shows such as Celtica, The Wiggles, which performed to 2 full houses, Bill Bailey, again a capacity house, and a rescheduled Solomeo, close to capacity. And together with Solomeo, they got a free shower. Just as some of the patrons, because there's a free shower to some of the patrons as the roof leaked during the performance. So all of these shows have helped with our financial position. With the Australian bubble starting next week, we wait in anticipation to see what events will be on the touring circuit later this year. Our advanced bookings are still encouraging. So as we work towards achieving our objectives and understand that due to COVID, it could still be a couple of years before we're back to normal, our statement of intent has 3 major objectives, which has a number of performance measures. Our targets are not unachievable. However, we all understand that by going back into level 2 and above will seriously have an effect on our outcomes. We are keen to build the audience numbers and promote wide use of our facility. And indications are encouraging that people are wanting and not afraid to attend the theatre. Crowded House and the Wiggles are great examples. So, with COVID issues, ticketing issues, staffing issues, building issues, we're excited to be working in such an environment. Thank you.
Thank you, David, for that. Susan, that will be a very hard act to follow. Are you intending to do so?
Only if someone would like to ask me a question that I could help. But I just have to say we are part of the performing arts community, so you can expect that in future.
Thank you very much. I will open to questions from elected members. I'll just kick off with a question about Ticket Rocket, and I know you're in confidential negotiations around some of that, but it was more a connection with the statement of expectation, where we've been talking for a while about looking for opportunities for our ticketed events providers to work together under one umbrella. And does the sad demise of Ticket Rocket provide an opportunity for us to align some of our ticketing?
At the moment, we're still under contract. We've got a novation, and that is, I think, another 3 years. So at this stage, we are still committed to, we work with Ticketek now, but we have got that contract for another 3 years. So at this stage, we can't enter into anything definite, but I mean, discussions are certainly open.
Good, thank you. Question from Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Susan, and congratulations, David. There has been a lot of challenges that you've had to deal with over this time. One of the things that spring to mind for me is around that succession planning. So you've had staff changes, and now that you've come into the role, are there things that you're starting to identify as things that you should, put down in paper or create systems so that anybody coming in after you would have an easier time of it?
Yes, that's one of the things I'm looking at, absolutely, because the previous general manager was there for so long. He sort of knew it all, and he had the place running the way he wanted to run it. So when someone new comes along, it's simple things like trying to find the finances on the system and where's it filed into, looking for reports. So we're going to create a much simpler way of doing this, and we are going to go to a cloud-based system, which they haven't gone to at this stage, so we can operate. So should there be COVID again that we have to stay at home, we can operate freely from home, knowing that we have access to all the informations. But again, with staffing for jobs, absolutely, yes, we're looking. That's one of the things we are looking at.
Excellent, thank you.
Oh, I was just going to add to that on a board level. The board level is also aware of future-proofing, that, there's the management and operational stuff, but we also need to do the same at our board level, just the understanding of the history and where and why, and make sure that as new members coming in as trustees also have a full understanding, especially with the relationship with council and things like that. It takes a bit of getting used to.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, and thank you, David. Welcome back. Just one point that you raised was about the leaky roof, and I wondered if you could just expand on that a little bit more.
On Saturday night, about 3/4 of the way through the Solomeo concert, we had a heavy downpour. It didn't last for long, but that downpour did cause water to enter the auditorium. And it entered the auditorium up in the circle, in the back circle, in a place previously where there had been a leak, but hadn't leaked for such a long time because it had been repaired. Obviously, those repairs have come apart somewhere along the line over the summer months. So we had to, during the performance, unfortunately, mop up a lot of that water so it caused the least possible damage, move patrons. There was about 26 seats that were affected. But we've got shows tonight, we've got shows tomorrow night, and they're going to go ahead. And we've got a contingency because they're all downstairs and no one's upstairs tonight or tomorrow night. So if it rains, we'll be keeping an eye on that leak. But the patrons won't know. The City Council is onto the case. Sunday morning, we were doing reports and notifying, and Monday morning the inspections were starting to take place. So hopefully it's fixed, or will be fixed.
So is there any inspections around whether it was seismic, to do with the seismic, or is it just to do with the building maintenance?
I'm picking that it's building maintenance. There was a roof report done, I believe, earlier this year for the Regent, and I know some work has been done on some of the areas, but it has been how many years now since that roof was done, and it's just maintenance at this stage. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good point. Thank you, Councillor Harper, for raising those. I will just note that we have the annual report on maintenance and renewal plans for cultural facilities on our work schedule for August, and we might just capture with the officers that the roof issues of the Regent be specifically reflected through that so that we can keep an eye on it. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Oops, sorry. Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Susan and David, for the great presentation. I'm just asking about the financial predictions going forward in the Statement of Intent, and whether you feel you've taken a hopeful view or a conservative view, and based on that, whether you feel that there's sufficient resourcing going into the Regent to be able to keep going, given, as you've rightly pointed out, COVID isn't over yet and there could still be future effects.
I had a discussion during these 4 weeks that I've been in the job with the accountants, and we've considered the approach to be conservative. And depending on what's going to happen in the future, you know, we're reasonably happy with the figures that are down here, that they can be achievable.
Okay, I'll take that as a positive response then. Thank you.
Councillor Butt.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, David, for your presentation. And can I say performance?
I think we all agree with that.
You have described one of the reasons during the COVID-19, school prize givings, cancellation of school prize givings, and performances by the schools. Are we charging considerable amounts to these schools for these events?
In my opinion, no, absolutely not. We do have different rating systems for charging. We have a community rate, and the schools have been very supportive, and haven't found that rate too much at this stage. The school cancellations were because the children had done a lot of work before the COVID came. They just couldn't put the show on, and they just couldn't pick it up when we went back to normal, say, right, now we're going to do it, because they had to schedule it into their school programming year. We do have later this year schools coming back and doing their performances this year, so that's why things are looking much brighter this year.
Thank you. One more. I consider what you have done especially during the lockdown, managing and doing performance, dividing the theatre into 4 cordons and doing, it's much better than breaking 60 walnuts in 1 minute and standing 25 hours on one leg. Have you thought about putting your name in the Guinness Book of Records? But that was the only theatre at that time in the world doing something.
Yes, and the idea actually, you know, came up, and I can drop a name. You know, it was Alan Nagy from Act 3 Productions mentioned it at the meeting, and that's when we all sat round and thought, nah. Then we thought, well, it could work, and then we worked through it and drew up plans as to how it would work, and we sent it to the MP and said, you know, can we do this? And yes, we created history, really.
Thank you.
I guess say, if someone wants to nominate us, I don't think we'd say no.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Susan. Thank you, David. My question, firstly, certainly acknowledges that it's been a year full of challenges, as you stated. But I think you're, quite clearly aware, at least at the board level, around council's intent in terms of environmental performance improving over time, not just through council but through CCOs and as well. And just in looking at your statement of intent there, there was some reference to recycling. That's something that's been with us a long time. And I just wondered if there's other consideration that the board may be taking around, I guess, other aspects of environmental sustainability that may be able to be tackled, and how actively the board is pursuing that.
I think in terms of the board, I think that's something we would like to have some input from someone who's a bit more expert about. It's easy to look at the place and think we can do this and this, but I'm sure there must be a whole lot of other things we could do. So it would be actually, one of the things we looked at was actually getting an environmental consultant in to actually have a look at how we're operating. Already we're trying to eliminate paper. We no longer send out board minutes. You know, we're trying to do small things, but I'm sure there are a lot that we're missing. So we'd really like an expert to come in and actually give us some sort of help on a plan. One of the big issues is the plastic from the catering site. And we are looking into several options for that, something that's a little bit more than an instant throwaway glass. That does impact on costs, of course, and the Friends are very careful, shall we say, with their money. So it's a matter of working around those negotiations. But I think I would have to say I would need some careful advice that we could do, and we're certainly open to that, which is why it's in the statement of intent.
So
Is that okay?
I do appreciate just the frank answer in terms of where things are at there. So I guess without pressing too much further, I mean, I certainly didn't get that from reading the statement of intent that there would be, you know, specific advice coming to the organization in the, you know, areas of interest. I guess, can you give us some?
Well, that could be, sorry to interrupt, this is a draft. We could actually go back, if that's something you would like us to do. We could fill out a bit more information if that's something you would like.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to hear, and I guess we can consider if we want to make that formal or informal feedback to you. So yeah, thanks for the information, Madam Chair.
Thank you. If you do intend to bring an amendment, if you could just note that, and we can add it to the to item 3, which is the comments back on the statement of intent. So even in broad terms, I think that will be helpful. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you both for presenting today. Just had a couple of questions around the financials in your statement of intent. On page 48, the movement between 2022 and 2023 for employee-related costs is quite a step up there. And I'm just wondering if it would be interesting to understand what the context of that increase is. So the 2022 amount is 445, and then it jumps up to 540,000.
Councillor, which page are we on?
48.
48, okay, thank you. Oh, yeah.
Having to comment on someone else's report, off the top of my head, I can't answer that one.
Okay.
But I can get that information and I can get it to you.
Okay, thank you. And just one further question on the following page. In 2022, the under asset purchases, there's a $211,000 amount there, and I'm just wondering if what that relates to.
Yes.
It's on the next page.
Yeah, sure. It's part 2 of the sound system. There's a desk that needs to be purchased, a sound desk, and there's also a couple of other items there. Just trying to recall what they are before I left the warm chair. Yes, that was identified in the 10-year plan. These items were in the 10-year plan, so if you look at our 10-year plan, you'll be able to see what they are.
Okay, lovely. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had a few more questions. Sorry. I wondered if I could seek a comment from you on how you're finding the relationship at a governance level between the board and council. Is this sitting in a good place? Should we be doing more? Is there anything you'd like to raise with us in this forum?
I guess, because I was here yesterday with the Catcher Birch, I guess there is a bit of concern about the future and way things are going. I was talking to one of the staff today, just saying, look, we're really open, and I think it's actually as much our fault that we haven't asked for help or asked people to come or asked for some expertise in the areas that you were able to help us with. But I do believe in terms of the 17A review, that happened last year. We sent a letter, we wanted to meet, and that hasn't happened. So I do believe there have been some breakdowns in communications, and quite frankly with COVID, everyone has been trying to catch up and things have been put on the back burner. But from what I'm hearing, there seem to be more meetings being provided, and the board is very open to that, and I think we would be taking advantage of, keeping that very positive relationship. I don't want it to become anything other than something where we're all working together with the same objectives and same goals. May have slightly different ways of getting there, as long as we understand why that's happening, and it's the nature of our business, which is very unique.
So I take from that, Susan, that you would like to seek a workshop with elected members for the Board of the Regent.
Yes, and we'd also like to take you round the Regent and give you the real background upstairs in the projection room, and align the fly gallery if you're brave enough. And I mean, most people only ever see from the proscenium arch back. And if you actually see the workings, I mean, every time I go past the green room and that door is open to the electoral, and it's like a spaceship. It's just full of lights blinking, and I mean, to think that someone has to understand how that operates. It gives you a big idea of such a huge asset we are managing on your behalf and the city's behalf, and would love to show it to you.
Well,
I'm very proud of it.
Note that and take it up with governance. I don't think we need a recommendation, but leave it with me. And then just a final question from me, which was, you'll have noted in the officer's report that there are some comments about recommendations for the final statement of intent. I just wanted to check in with you if there's anything there that gave you pause for thought or concern that you would like to reflect in this forum, or if you're happy with what's being suggested.
I thought it was a very good report, very good report. All of those issues have been brought up before, but because of, I know we'll get sick of the COVID excuse, they just got put on the back burner, and we're aware of them. The one that I actually was querying was that economic impact. But in my meeting today, I got an explanation of exactly what that's about, and I believe there's a workshop that's going to be that we can have that will help us, or else there's actually an app or some sort of program that's already existing within council that we would be able to use.
Right.
So that was my one that I looked at and didn't really understand where that came from, but I now understand it, and we'll take it to the board and explain.
Thank you.
And hopefully hear more about it.
Yeah. The General Manager is indicating yes beside me, so yes, that's a thing. Okay, that brings us to the end of questions. Thank you, David. Thank you, Susan. If you want to take your seat back in the gallery, we will look to move the recommendations. So the three in front of us, that the 6-month performance report 1 July to 31 December 2020, attachment 1, submitted by the Regent Theatre be received. 2, that the draft statement of intent 2021 to 24, attachment 2, submitted by the Regent Theatre Trust be received. And 3, that the Regent Theatre Trust is advised of the recommended changes to the final statement of intent 2021-24 outlined in table 4 as amended of this memorandum titled the Regent Theatre Trust 6th-month performance report 1 July to 31 December 2020 and draft statement of intent 2021-24. I will move that. I will seek a seconder. Councillor Meehan will second that. And I will open for any comments, elected members. In moving it, I'm going to take this opportunity to say thank you so very much for the work that has gone into putting together these reports. We absolutely appreciate and have heard loudly over the last few months and years that there's a lot of work goes into the reporting requirements for CCOs, and we appreciate the effort that goes into bringing full, complete and transparent reporting into this chamber. It's very important and we do appreciate it. I'm delighted, not just by the style of your presentation, David, but by the content also. There is nothing like a full theatre, and the Regent at capacity is a sight to behold. You know, it's enormous, actually. I was reading with interest, elected members may also have been following the goings-on in Tauranga, where the commissioner pointed out that Tauranga is very poorly served for theatres. Their capacity theatre is 400 in a city that is much bigger than Palmerston North. And here we sit with the joy that is the Regent at 1,400, give or take, operating at capacity, which showed the value that it is to our community. Of course, it's concerning to hear about 35 shows being cancelled, but that's not about you, that's about the COVID. It concerns me particularly, though, within that, to hear that our national touring providers are part of that issue, that Royal New Zealand Ballet particularly, the Symphony. There is a particular responsibility on those national organisations to support our regional theatre offerings, and I'll be interested to follow that conversation. And we'll recognise the very good work done in the heights of not the uncertainty of COVID, working with Act 3 to come up with that innovative solution. I think I noted at the Regional Theatre Awards that the Court Theatre in Christchurch were busy stealing our thunder and claiming that they were the first theatre to think of splitting themselves into 4. But I happen to know that the Court Theatre in Christchurch only thought of it because a Palmy person works there. So we will take all of the credit as Palmerston North, but of course that credit belongs with you as the people who run that facility. So thank you so very much. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and certainly first to commend the Regent, Susan, David, and all those around you on what you've achieved and what you've worked through. Truly impressive, and a very grateful community for what you continue to do. I did want to just comment briefly around the line of questioning around environmental sustainability and ensuring that all of our CCOs, but in particular here, the Regent, have opportunity to give that full pursuit. And while I recognize that we could, try for yet another resolution here today, we've already given that direction from this table through the form of a council resolution asking for improvements over time. And so I think that direction sits there, and that it's really for the boards and our officers or consultants, as boards may choose to engage, to ensure that due weight's given to that over time. Recognize that there's been a lot on the CCO's plates of recent times that may have seen some of these other matters shifted a little bit towards the side of the radar, and so this is really just a comment to bring those a bit closer to the center and to wish the Regent well in tackling that challenge in the future, as well as all the other opportunities that you're pursuing, Madam Chair.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I just want to say well done to the Regent for what you do for our community. All those in the hospitality sector do appreciate all the shows that you do put on for our community. I also just want to say to you that thanks for bringing to our attention the issues that you've had with the roof in the Regent, and that to keep bringing those issues up with the building managers in the City Council. It is a jewel in our crown, and we do want to make sure that we are on top of it, so keep bringing those matters to our maintenance team. But well done on what you've done for flicking in and out of the levels that we did have to flick in and out of, and responding to that as you did respond to it. It is tough, and you did respond well, so well done to you.
Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I echo everybody else's comments, but I particularly want to focus on the excellent ability to weather a storm that you have shown in the last 6 months to a year. And in particular, just draw everyone's attention to the fact that revenue was down 24% on budget, but 53% on the previous year. And that's a huge hit for any organisation. And although management is, David has stated that he's confident that the figures are achievable, I think we do just need to bear in mind that there's quite an uncertain future for the event-type economy at the moment, and that although, the Regent's statement of intent is predicting that it'll be able to get through this, we just need to be aware that times are hard for theatres and other entertainment-type industry, and just to be aware that if things change, then we need to be prepared to respond accordingly. So, well done, Regent, for still maintaining a good bottom line in spite of everything.
Thank you. There are no further speakers, so I will, reply to the comments by saying you should take our congratulations and thanks back to the board, back to the Friends of the Regent and all the associated operators that go to make it such a strong commercial provision in the city, but also noting from Councillor Johnson's comments how much we value your contribution, and Councillor Harper actually, for the economic development of the city, but also to your social and cultural well-being. You play a really important role that goes beyond just putting things on a stage. You're really important in how we experience our city, and thank you. Elected members, I'll ask you to vote. Thank you. Carried unanimously. And we will move to the next item, which is item 8, the Te Manawa Museum's Trust Draft Statement of Intent 2021-24. And we're having Andy and John to come, and Catherine coming as well. So we have Andy Lowe, Chief Executive, John Folk, Chair, and Catherine Parsons, Finance Lead, coming to speak to us. So this is not your 6-month report because you presented that at the last committee. You're on a slightly different track to the other CCOs. This is your draft statement of intent. So over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. And try turning that on. And can I first of all apologise for a rather boring presentation, but I'm sure that Prue will add some levity during your afternoon tea. I'm John Falk, our Chair, as you already said. I've got Andy Lowe, our CEO, and Catherine Parsons, our Finance Leads, here to answer any difficult questions that we can't answer. It seems that we are often here bending your ears, so I will try and keep this fairly brief. Andy's going to talk about some of our recent work and highlights. So in terms of my comments, I'd like to keep those to a more governance level about what the board have been up to. Following our workshop with councillors and officers last year, we made some changes to our priorities, and notwithstanding COVID, and I'm sorry I have to mention that, but we have made some progress. One of the things we would like to progress on is whether we go to another workshop later on this year, because that really was helpful in our whole process of developing our plans for this year, but I'm sure that'll be a dialogue we can have later. As our last report mentioned, we've had some good growth in the education space, and that's not just been limited to the Leotech, the contract area with the Ministry of Education, but in the wider sense. It's been really pleasing lately that the Holocaust exhibition that, if you haven't seen it, do come and see that, by the way, has attracted large numbers of school groups, and practically the whole role of Boys High School, in fact, have been, just to mention one school. So that's been a great example of something that we could do in this current environment, but also provide, in a sense, education and entertainment together, which I think is really part of our brief. So it brings education, social history and social development all together, and the numbers have really exceeded our expectations so far, which has been very pleasing. As mentioned by the council officers in their report, our new partnership with Rangatani has been another major initiative that we've been working on. This has taken some working through, and to be fair, we're still evolving the final structure and the way that will operate. But the work is coming along really well so far, and it will develop as we move forward, with reporting being one of the things that we're actually working on so that we can just see how successful that has been and in what areas. We've completed a base evaluation, and we'll actually look at that now and see just how well that can work as we move forward. Another area that has been mentioned in the report was the area of visitor research. Our last board meeting had a rather fulsome report on that, which we're still digesting, but we are progressing with that as well. Finally, the thing that we have just started to move our minds to is the changes to the Trustee, or in the Trustee Act 1999. We've completed a base evaluation of the legal changes there, and we're now going to take legal advice as to any amendments that we need to make, and also a way that we can make simple and clear instructions back to our trustees as to how their duties and responsibilities have been changed by the legal enactment. Also, our wider training program for trustees, which was stalled due to COVID again, during the last year, but we're going to recommence that as time allows as we move forward to the middle of this year and beyond. In the meantime, as we move along with our Rangitane operation and experiment, we're going to see a need for a refresher treaty and cultural awareness training across our organisation, and that's a priority for our middle year. One thing that might be useful perhaps, and we'll talk to other CCOs about, is whether that training and also the work that we're doing with the Trustee Act 1999 amendments, whether that's something they might want to pick up on what we've done and perhaps share that. I said I'd be brief, so I'll now pass across to Andy.
John.
O kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou I runga I te kaupapa te rā, he rā whakahirihira tēnei, nō nei rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. O kia ora, John sort of covered most things really, as you know, and we've already done our 6 months, so I don't really want to go over too much, but it is, this statement of intent is around embedding some good practices in terms of process for future exhibition programming. It's also around visitor market research, fundraising, and real honing in on the marketing side of things. So it's sort of foundational stuff that we're working through into the future that will really help us. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that we've starting to work on, and that is we've joined up with Qualmark again, which we were part of a few years ago, then went to CMARS, but this is around the environmental work and getting some basic assessment and research done in terms of what we're doing in that space. And we're about to, hopefully just before the end of the financial year, get a whole new exhibition lighting system in place that Central Energy Trust has paid for, that will be energy efficient and also be a first for New Zealand museums, actually. So that's something that we control on the ground and is quite different for the art gallery space. So it's a big first for us, and we'll be able to gauge how much power we're using in that space too. Just wanted to also tell you about, you probably know this already, a couple of exciting opportunities we had coming out of COVID was 2 opportunities to work with the UK, and that's the International Wildlife Photographer of the Year exhibition coming from the Natural History Museum in London, and it opens on Friday. Hopefully some of you will be able to get there. And that wouldn't have been able to happen if COVID hadn't happened, because some venues fell down in the UK. So that meant that we could have it here for quite a good price. And we've also got another one coming up in July, which is an amazing exhibition about automator, mechanical things that move that you can put together yourself as well. And that's called Curious Contraptions, we're calling that, and that opens, and that comes from the UK as well, and that opens in July. So there's some some opportunities that came out of COVID that we kind of picked up on and looking forward to. So I don't really want to go into too much detail because it's kind of there, but hopefully you'll enjoy your time with Prue. And nō reira ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Thank you both. I will open up for questions, councillors, if you have any. Andy, John, I'll repeat and take it as notice. This is coming for those of you who haven't. I'll repeat the questions I put to the Regent about your relationship between the board and council. John, I took from your comments that you would seek another workshop so you probably don't need to say that again. But if there's anything else you'd like to add, then do that. And also, if there's any comments that you have, particularly on the officer recommendations to the draft statement of intent, I would invite those now.
I think particularly in terms of the relationship, we've got to always remember that the council is effectively our shareholder or owner, so that the relationship is one of that nature. That said, though, I think we have now a good relationship with both councillors and with the council officers. And that workshop was part of actually regenerating that last year, and I think it worked very effectively to do so. We also have the advantage of regular contact with you and Councillor Barrett, so that helps us get a good background, if you like, into what's happening within council in terms of the vision of the elected representatives. Council officers also have quite a lot of contact with us, probably more than they really want, but that I think really it's a relationship that benefits more from contact on small issues reasonably frequently rather than waiting until there's something big to address.
Thank you. And anything specifically on the officers' comments, officers' recommendations on the draft SOI?
Just a couple of things. I just wanted to really thank Sarah Claridge as well, because she's been really, communicative, and we've worked really well together on this draft. I missed a couple of things in the end. It was my fault. It was around the comment on page, I don't know what page it's on yours, but it's ambitious proposal to become carbon negative and sustainable. That kind of what it was seeks to become. so we're working through that, and I guess what I mentioned before around the Qualmark, assessment and having that foundation of information and research around where we're at will help us work towards that as well. But that's what I just wanted to mention. Yeah.
Good. And I know you mentioned in your comments, John mentioned working with the other CCOs around the trustee legal enactment issues. I wondered actually if your ambitious proposal to seek to become carbon neutral is also something you could work with the other CCOs. That would seem to fit in nicely with the direction Councillor Barrett was indicating in the Regent discussions. If there's scope to discuss broadly across the CCOs what might be achieved, would Te Manawa be open to being involved in or leading in those discussions?
Absolutely, and I'm not sure what the other CCOs are doing or have done. They've probably done lots of things around the Qualmark assessment anyway, so it's something that we could talk about, or we could
Thank you. I'm sure they'll pick that up. They're looking like they've no idea.
But just to add to that, Madam Chair, if I may, I think that's one area where we can combine together, toss ideas around and potentially get further, because we can then come back to council and say, well, look, here's what we'd like to try and do. Let's all get our heads together.
I think that would be very good. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You well traversed some of the territory I was hoping to cover, which leaves me with really just one question, which is a question that I get asked multiple times every day. The moa bones, when will they be available for the public to have a look at? Will they be available for the public to have a look at?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question, Brent. At the moment, they're with the iwi. So they're with us, but it's really dependent on what the iwi want to do. And we'll be guided by them as to when and if that can happen.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So question possibly to officers around the comments and recommendations for final statement of intent around developed performance measures. So there's a comment about the online reach and visitor satisfaction that the actual figure is higher than the target for the following 3 years. And the officer's recommendation is either that targets are revised if they're already been achieved, or remove the measure completely. I don't really want the measure removed completely. I don't think that would be helpful. So I don't know whether I need to put up an amendment to change that, but I don't really, because if we leave it as is, it's possible that Te Manawa may go away and decide just to remove the measure completely. Do you see what my question is? How to address that is the question.
And do you feel able to respond to that? What
Absolutely, yeah. We should revise them, and we're really committed to having them in, because it's important. The whole digital thing is hugely important for us and how we go forward within that space as well.
Okay, so we can just leave it informally at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Andy and John. I guess I've got a question around where Te Manawa sits probably nationally, because Te Manawa's quite ambitious and not a traditional museum by any stretch. I think you've worked really hard to challenge the notion of sticking to your knitting and, you know, enhancing your partnership with Rangitane and the focus on climate action and those sorts of things as an organisation. And so I wondered how it was, I guess, received or spoken about nationally. And I'm not suggesting all of New Zealand may be talking about this, but certainly I know you've got relationships with other museums and galleries, and where Te Manawa sits kind of within that. Are you leading this work? Are there others doing similar work? It's a bit of a toot your own horn question, but I am genuinely interested in sort of how we compare.
If I can just answer, I don't think there's any metric that we can point to, but if you look at the apparent recognition of Te Manawa nationally, there are often favourable comments made. I think part of the reason why we are able to achieve the things that we do with exhibitions is partly because of that reputation that Te Manawa has. It's also actually, because he wouldn't mention it, part of Andy's reputation as well. And if you look at the work that we've done, for instance, with Santa Cruz in California, and the way that they, in fact, wanted us to participate, so they paid our staff's airfares to go over and do a course there. It's partly that. It's also partly the reason why Andy's on the board of Te Papa now, because that also gives a reach into Te Manawa. And I'm sure that whenever he's having a conversation there, be it with Franwell, the chair, or whoever, I'm sure he's advancing Te Manawa's cause constantly and banging on about us. So it's really a combination of two things. Te Manawa's very much recognised, but so are our team and our CEO.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. And just a small financial question, if that's okay. Just looking at page 78 at your financials and your statement of intent, and just wanting to understand further your assumptions around your revenue. Looking at year 3 there, I see the other revenue, there's quite a big drop there. I'm just wondering a couple of things. Is your other revenue inclusive of your door takings?
Good question. Excuse me. Just ask Catherine to come.
We don't have door takings as such, really, because we don't charge for much. The increases for the first and second year in the SOI relate to some targeted income around trying to recoup the cost of some of the large exhibitions, and also some planned funding applications.
So the drop in year 3, is that just a lower expectation based on the...
on what we've got coming, and also whether we'll need the funds in that year, need additional external funds, because we've still managed to make a surplus without those planned projects.
Okay, so I'm also seeing that you've got a higher expectation around your sponsorship and fundraising for that year. So you're fairly comfortable that that's a realistic expectation,
We
is it?
worked through it at several management meetings, and I've worked with the manager who's in charge of the most expenditure, if you like, to see what his requirements are and what he expects to get in through his projects.
Okay.
We also have a long-term plan to perhaps hire someone who's dedicated to fundraising.
Right.
So we hope to achieve it that way.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in regards to the targets where the Councillor Johnson mentioned around the revised, I'd certainly encourage it, but I just wanted to comment around, in past reports, you've had an emphasis on the online reach around digital, but there was a feeling around making sure there was a measure around actual physical attendance, visitor numbers, and I just want some comment around the focus that each have.
Oh, kia ora, Vaughan. Yeah, the visitor numbers, what we're doing at the moment is leaving them, as you've seen, at 150. And what's going to happen is, during our assessment with, we're doing some environmental impact and economic impact work with Events Insights. Phil Hildred, who used to be at Destination Manawatu, is helping us with that. So that will help us work out also the numbers for future. So they may actually go up, or they may stay the same, but we just don't know yet until we do that research.
Okay. And second question, unrelated to the visitor number, but the one around strategic relationships and around the Art Society, knowing that there's been, I guess, some issues in the past, or they've voiced issues, but how would you describe that now, and how do you see the working ahead from this point over the next 3 years?
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, Councillor Denison, if I can just answer that. It's extremely good at the moment, in my view. The work that we all did last year in working on the relationships, I think has got us all into a much better space. The Art Society is also, as you know, formed a separate trust to own their assets, and we've helped them with that. And in fact, we're getting good participation from Arts Society members to our exhibition openings, and generally I think it's a very much better relationship.
Cool. That's pleasing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Harpiter.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, John and Andy. Just one question on the personnel costs on page 78. I noticed that it's gone up by 300,000 on last year.
Probably Catherine. Do you want to explain that one? Sorry to do this swapping about. We always seem to do this to you.
Sorry, last year we had 6 vacant positions, and we budgeted for this year to fill them up. That hasn't happened, so I'm still budgeting as if we were fully staffed. There may be some gains around there, but it's not an ideal way to gain.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of questions. So thanks all 3 of you for your participation this afternoon. We will look to the recommendations on screen, which I'm happy to move that the draft statement of intent 2021-24 submitted by Te Manawa Museum Trust be received, and 2, that the Te Manawa Museums Trust is advised of the recommended changes to the final statement of intent 2021-24 outlined in table 1 of this memorandum titled Te Manawa Museums Trust Draft Statement of Intent 2021-24. I'll seek a seconder for that. Councillor Barrett, thank you. And open that for any comment, please. Just to start us off, thank you so much for everything you do, particularly noting the change of feeling around the society's engagement with Te Manawa. I've certainly noticed that when I've been at events, that they're present and supportive and you're actively engaged in your programme, and it is really pleasing to see, and certainly means I get fewer emails, so thank you about that. Nice to hear a COVID benefit being talked around about the table, about seeing those exhibitions come here that we wouldn't have had the opportunity to receive if New Zealand wasn't in its very unique position of being able to have people in spaces. So that's very pleasing to hear indeed, and I'm looking forward to both of those exhibitions. And I will follow on from the response to the questions from the Deputy Mayor about reputation. Elected members, most of us were at Te Papa and spoke with the Chair and CE. And I think in their comments I took away the very high regard that Te Manawa is held in the national environment for some of the innovative work that we're doing. And they particularly referenced the work that we're doing around diverse communities and an inclusive approach to bringing people into spaces which they might traditionally have not felt was their space. Councillor Johnson and I were both delighted to be at the film launch, I don't know if you call it that, of Rurangi, which was a transgender story. And again, I thought how special it is that we host those communities in our museum, because it's not actually us hosting them, it is their museum. And they feel that was a safe place to tell those stories and have those conversations, and the Q&A that followed that demonstrated that very emotionally, actually, for me. So thank you for the work that you do. Nice to see other board members in the audience today. Thank you to all of the board, all of your societies, and all of the volunteers and staff that go to make Te Manawa the success that it is. So on that, I will ask you to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. And we move to item 9, which is Carcher Birch Trust Board 6-month performance report up to the 31st of December 2020 and the draft statement of intent 2021 to 24. And we have Nikki Birch, Manager, and Grant O'Donnell, Chair, who I'm sure is sick of this room this week already. But thank you for coming in again to speak to us, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. Yes, we're getting to know the place well. Our presentation today may well suffer a little from the excessive amount of time we spent on previous focal points. Anyway, I'm going to speak relatively briefly and then I'll pass it over to Nikki to make such comments as she wishes and to answer questions. So I'm dealing with the 6-month report. All I really need to say there is that we ended the period in the black, which I think is quite an achievement in regard to the major downturn. We recognise that there was a significant wage subsidy which assisted us there, but it enabled us to keep all the staff employed and gainfully employed throughout that whole period. We were able to carry out a number of our usual functions, but as Councillor Johnson has recognised, events have taken a hit and are likely to do so in the future. Probably our highlight for this period was our 125th anniversary, which we took to be, well, the result of it, we took to be an affirmation of the success of the performance of the trust and management from its inception up to the present time. Just to make the point, from a financial point of view, our current ratio is 1.5, which I suggest is better than some of the other CCOs, although I'd hate to be thought to be comparing ourselves with them. Our budget is so small by comparison. But that means that we have 1.5 times assets as against liabilities, which makes us fairly secure. There is a comment in the notes that most of that relates to receivables, but for the kind of business that we have, that's where all your assets lie. We don't hold much in the way of capital assets, so that's not an unusual factor. So turning to the SOI, this has been a difficult document for us to prepare. The elephant in the room, of course, is the Section 17A review and the rather negative response we think that we've received to our 10-year plan. And we feel that our 10-year plan's been a little bit misunderstood. So the approach that we've adopted is simply a business as usual. In terms of establishing the next 3 years' expenditure. That's not to say that we haven't planned in the next 3 years for various works to be carried out, we will, if we are able, proceed with those. Comment has been made, and I'll come back to that with the council officer's report and recommendations. I just lost my train of thought there for a moment. Yes, I'm thinking of the funding. One of the issues that we've always had is the question of where our funding comes from. We are not in our SOI seeking to extract a lot more money from council. When we talk about external funding, we're generally talking about projects where we are going out to get money from charitable funding institutions. And of course, whether or not we can get the job done depends on whether we can get that funding. There is some requirement or some request for funding from council, but that's set out in our 10-year plan, and of course our SOI for the next 3 years would vary if we were to receive a positive approach to the 10-year plan. So it's a little difficult to know exactly where we are. I just need to point out as well, as far as our numbers are concerned, we're tracking very well. We look to have at the end of the first year an $8,000 deficit, excluding depreciation, and it needs to be made clear that as I have said and Nikki has said a number of times, the depreciation that we have in our accounts doesn't belong there. It really belongs in your accounts because it relates to assets which don't belong to us. Nevertheless, it turns up in the bottom of our accounts and spoils them year in and year out. And the other aspect about that is that even though we're showing the depreciation in our accounts, we don't actually have the provision to fund them because there's no spare cash. And of course, that's not a sensible approach to have in any set of accounts. So perhaps if I can talk now to the council comments and recommendations. I had a very constructive discussion with Sarah about the original draft, and we're pleased that there's been some modifications. Nevertheless, I think I need to clarify some of the issues set out there. We're talking now on your page 100, and we're looking on the left-hand column, second box. Council believes the trust deed needs to be updated to include more of an emphasis on commercial viability. Our position on that is that there's nothing wrong with the trust deed in terms of providing the power for the trust board to actually carry out commercial activities. That power already exists there. We don't need to modify it for that. What we do need to modify the trust deed in relation to is the to bring it into the 21st century. It was originally written in 1991, and things have moved on from there, including electronic communication and all that sort of thing. Currently, we're not actually empowered to carry out meetings other than in person, so that's just an example. So we are happy to work, and in fact we have requested on more than one occasion that we work with the council staff to modify the trust deed. I may say that there is still another smaller elephant in the room, and that is the decision that council had taken to cancel the CCO character of Keisha Birch for the purposes of cutting down on the audit costs. Despite some uncertainty among council staff, the truth is that this is coming up for review in June because it was a 3-year decision, and that would have required some changes to the trust deed. So depending on what the future of the board is, that would be another factor that would need to be taken into account. Turning to the KPIs, and this is mentioned on page 100 on the right-hand column, third box down, we worked at length in preparing our 10-year plan with council officers, spent a lot of time on determining KPIs. Had been told by the auditor that we had far too many of them, so we had simply been trying to show that we were actually on the ball, but obviously we needed to focus on a few smaller ones. So we came up with a proposal whereby we were going to ask a number of specific questions, and we were going to record the information from those specific questions, and from that you would glean whether or not the board had been successful in terms of meeting its goal of achieving an understanding and an appreciation by the community. So it's not just simply a matter of saying we had X% of satisfied visitors. It's a matter of finding out from those visitors, useful information? Did they learn something when they came? Would they come again? Would they be interested in other heritage buildings or sites in the city? Those were the questions that we were asking, and we give that information on those questions. I think we decided on carrying out 100 queries, consultations with visitors, random, and we give the answers to those. I think we achieved 95% of those within that 6-month period. So my view is that what we actually have in terms of the KPIs is perfectly acceptable and actually achieves what I believe the council would want to know, whether or not the Acacia Birch is actually becoming an item in the hearts and minds of the people of the city. Because we believe that if you get them to see it as a vital part of the city, and we are using it and we can add further value to it, then there'll be on-flow. We'll be able to sell more services and so on, get more people there. That's the thinking. And I think I've spoken already to the last item, which is the one about proposed activities requiring unsecured external funding. I spoke about that with Sarah and she's adapted that. We could be more clear, I guess, in our SOI that as to which items or where we were expecting to get the funding from for which items, and we're happy to do that if necessary to provide more specificity. You were asking about relationship between council and the board. It's not good at the moment, and the relationship between the council staff and the board is not good at the moment. We feel that since the Section 17A review commenced, we've really been placed in outer darkness, and there's been very little practical communication with council. Let me give you an example. We are resourced at a fairly low level, as you know. We have one single full-time employee, and she is absolutely flat tack with all the work that she does. She works 7 days a week and often much more than an ordinary 8-hour day. So we're always concerned to ensure that we are complying with all the rules and so forth that a CCO is required to do. I suggested to council that they might be able to assist us by letting us know, because you'll be going through the same kind of exercise, as to whether there were any legislative or other practical issues that they were aware of that we should be aware of ourselves and applying to our operation. We wrote emails to the council over a period of literally months requesting a response in that, and finally I rang the council to talk to somebody there and was told, well, it wouldn't work because the work in council relating to Acacia Birch is split between about 4 different departments, and they couldn't coordinate adequately in a way that would be able to bring to us any kind of useful information as to how or what we might be needing to comply with. So I say that because I think it's important that we understand that in a practical sense we have not been getting a good response from council. Not in relation, I mean, there's a hell of a lot of communication between council and the board over Section 17A and SOIs and 6-month reports and that sort of thing. There's plenty of that, but not in terms of the, for example, we, and this is not within this particular period, but we were looking for some help from council in relation to the advertising for the last function that we had, and that didn't appear. In fact, it didn't exist, it didn't happen. and that, we think, probably impacted on the success of the, to some extent anyway. Anyway, that's enough from me, and I'll pass it over to Nikki to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Grant. Yes, there is a question from Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Grant and Nikki. My question's about the art trail, where Keisha Birch was a venue, and as you've noted in your report, a very successful one, and I thought was a very an appropriate sort of event for Keisha Birch to be involved with. Have you looked into any more of those kind of collaborations with visual arts or other arts to open up Keisha Birch and get people through the door? Because, I mean, that you had 500 visitors, I think you said in your report.
Absolutely.
It was a big success.
We're constantly looking, constantly, and I obviously had quite a few conversations with the Square Edge people afterwards. I've also had a bit to do with the Multicultural Society or Association lately. Absolutely, we're always making sure that people know that it's available for those sorts of events.
Did you, I guess, are you thinking that you could take the initiative in that, as opposed to sort of saying, well, we're available, that you could work in partnership? Because I know that there's often groups looking for partnerships themselves to try and, do the 1 + 1 is more than 2 thing.
The board regularly offer the venue. We take care of the venue side of it. I don't have the time, nor the staff, nor the expertise, if you like, to be operating people's events on their behalf. And most of the time, they don't have the funding to be able to pay someone. So it's usually a collaboration, as it was with Square Edge. They came with the expertise. Same with the musicals. They bring the expertise. We deal with the venue side. We help as much as we can with in-house marketing, social media, all of those sorts of things. So the skills and resources that we have, we offer freely. But we can't operate their events, if that's what you mean.
From the board's perspective, we're not able to take a risk. We don't have the resources to take a risk. We've got a small amount of cash in the bank. We did have talked about it in our 10-year plan about a seeding fund that could be established by council that would enable us to take some risk, which would enable us to be more proactive in terms of trying to promote events and that sort of thing. But without those resources, the board simply can't take a risk of losing money on an event. So that's why the emphasis goes on others to organise and carry out and take the risk on the events. We provide the venue, and we do contribute, because we contribute by providing staffing and power and a whole variety of other things, for which we frequently receive no return.
Thank you.
Councillor Hancock.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, Grant and Nikki. Look, I just want to take you back to page 100. The second point of just talking about the draft SOI there. The council believes that the trust deed needs to be updated with more of an emphasis on commercial viability. And the board's response to that is that the commercial viability might affect the charitable trust, the charitable status of the trust. There seems to be a tension there. Is there a pathway through that particular difference?
Well, I think it's summed up in what I said before, that I believe the trust deed as it stands enables the board to carry out commercial activities. The trust deed itself doesn't need to be modified from that perspective. At least as an ex-lawyer, that's the conclusion that I draw from reading the trust deed. This provision here is just one of our reasons as to why we're not that keen on changing the trust deed. Quite apart from anything else, the trust deed reflects the view of the council and the community at the time that the organisation was established, and to And there is this tension, of course, between heritage and commerciality. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, but I suppose what I'm trying to drive at here is that the commercial viability seems to be fatal in terms of the, according to the comments from the board, commercial viability seems to be fatal in terms of the charitable trust status.
Well, if the board is making a profit, and let's face it, that's not likely because it receives $100,000 from council. But if the board were to make a profit, then and that profit wasn't staying with the board and being recycled, then it would lose its charitable status, or could lose its charitable status. But if I can expand on that, I think using the word viability in relation to an organisation which receives council funding of this sort and simply attempts to break even at this stage, viability is really not an appropriate word. Viability is appropriate if you're running a business and you're actually making more than you're spending. That's viability.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll leave it there. Thanks.
A question from Councillor... No, it's been answered. Lovely. Thank you. That brings us to the end of questions.
Thank you.
So the recommendations, as you see in front of you, are that the 6-month performance report, 1 July to 31 December 2020, attachment 1, submitted by Cutch Birch Trust Board, be received, that the draft statement of intent 2021-24, attachment 2, submitted by Cutch Birch Trust Board, be received, and that the Cutch Birch Trust Board is advised of the recommended changes to the final statement of intent 2021-24 outlined in table 3 of this memorandum, titled Cutch Birch Trust Board 6-month performance report up to 31 December 2020 and draft statement of intent 2021 to 24. I will move those. Seek a second, Councillor Barrett. Thank you. Open that for any comment. We'll note it's mentioned in the officer's report. I don't think it came out in the commentary, but how absolutely delighted I'm sure we all were to celebrate the 125th anniversary of Cutch Birch House in the early summer. It was a lovely event, very well put together. It was lovely to see so many people who have a long-standing connection with the house and with the stories that it holds and tells. It was a very special event, and our thanks for how you managed that process. And as is traditional, our thanks to the board members, to the staff, to the volunteers that go to make Cutch Birch House work in the way that it does. And of course, there was the elephant and the baby elephant in the room that you mentioned. I'm not going to talk about those here, but we'll continue to have those conversations. Thank you. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I am going to talk about the elephant, if not the baby elephant. I just wanted to acknowledge that, the staff and the board of Cutch Birch are under pressure at the moment because of the Section 17A report, and that, obviously that, I feel for them in that regard. But nevertheless, it doesn't detract from the good work that has been done, nor the good work that's being planned to do. So I hear, in some of the responses that people are under pressure, and I totally feel for you in that situation. But also would like to say that I thought, in particular, the way that the art trail was staged at Cutch Birch was extremely successful, and it was a good partnership with Square Edge, and I think that needs to be commented on. Thanks.
Thank you. There are no further comments, so I will ask you to vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We move to item 10, which is the turn of the Globe Theatre Trust, presenting their 6-month performance report, 1 July to 31 December 2020, and their draft statement of intent, 2021 to 24, and That will be presented by the manager, Jerry Keating, and Margaret May, board secretary. Thank you both for being with us today. Last cab off the rank, but over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to thank the Council for their support to the Globe. And I also just want to remind you that we notified Council at the beginning of the year that our very long-standing chairperson, Maxine Dowell, retired from the chair. She's still very much on the board, other things going on in her life. And John Adams took over as chair, but unfortunately, he, through various circumstances beyond his control, he's not able to be here today. So you've got me. Jerry will do most of the talking, but I just want to pick up on one comment that's been said many times today, and having worked for a number of boards myself, the key person to all these organisations is the CEO. They work alone, they work incredible hours, they work with huge commitment. You know, they're expected to make sure that the toilets are clean, as well as meeting the performers, as well as meeting the audiences, as well as being strategic thinkers and being very much on the ground. Look, we couldn't do, all our organisations couldn't do without the brilliant people we have, and I think the Globe is particularly fortunate in having Jerry in our midst. Thank you, Jerry. I mean, they are key people. All the issues we've heard today, every time we've heard how wonderful, and I just want to, as a board, we value very much the work that our manager does. So I'll hand over to Jerry.
Wow. Just got a promotion from manager to CEO. Excellent.
Take
no salary increase, though.
No, well. Madam Chair, PMCC councillors and officers, it's my pleasure to present our 6-month report for July to December 2020 and also our draft statement of intent for the next 3 years. I'll just talk about the 6-month report just to kick off. Obviously at the Globe Theatre, COVID notwithstanding, it's been just another busy 6 months for us. As I've mentioned before in previous meetings, we're very fortunate that having a 200-seater and a 105-seater, that we can actually go ahead with those smaller type events. It's been very pleasing to notice over the last 6 months that we're getting a lot of different types of events. We're starting to pick up a few more conferences. We're definitely picking up a lot more movies. We're getting more musical acts coming through, especially obviously on the Kiwi side, because they realise they can't travel overseas, so they may as well put together some tours. I guess the highlights for the last 6 months would have been definitely Manawatu Youth Theatre and The Little Mermaid. 13 shows, pretty much all sold out, with young people totally running the show. Obviously, Graham Johnson isn't a young person, but everybody else behind the scenes, behind the stage, young people. It was just fantastic to watch. Obviously, it's mayhem, so if you're not into mayhem, don't come to the Globe Theatre in the month of July, because there's just children everywhere. August and September obviously saw us back into lockdown level 2, which as we know, changed some of the events that we had. I would like to just mention, and I have obviously mentioned this before, a huge thank you to the organisers of these big events, and also the members of the public who have purchased tickets. The number of shows that we had to reschedule or just change a little bit and move people to a different time slot. We were just overwhelmed with the kindness from the members of the public who understood that it was all due to COVID. It wasn't our fault, wasn't the performers' fault. More than happy to move their seats, more than happy to move to a different day. Yes, we did have to do some refunds, but it was nothing of the magnitude that it could have been. So I just wanted to, you know, for those members of the public who might be watching on YouTube, you're awesome. At the end of October, we farewelled our assistant manager, Jay, and put in process hiring a new manager who came on board in January, Matt Kilsby-Halliday, who is involved in a lot of the theatre stuff around, and I believe may have even come away with an award at the recent awards. One of the things that I've been trying to cement and grow is kind of like a one-stop shop when people want to come to the Globe Theatre. And this morning I came up with TTPP, which is basically, yeah, I know it's just the first letters of the 4 words that I had, but it's tickets, tech, posters, and promotion. The feedback we get from our hirers is that they love the fact that it's easy to come to the Globe Theatre, it's easy to work with us, our tech gets in touch, we solve everything, we organise the posters for them, we try and do as much promotion. We are primarily a venue for hire, but if we don't help promote the shows that are coming to the Globe Theatre, then the shows aren't going to come to the Globe Theatre. Performers, organisers, actors, musicians, they all talk to each other. And I know when I get a phone call and they go, oh, I was chatting to Bob last week and he said, you might be keen on having my show. And that's the feedback that I love getting. I can give the hirers as many surveys as I want, but I can't force them to answer them. So we've just been able to cement all of that, organise all of that for them. And I know for some of you who have been to our shows, and I know I'm sitting at the back and they make a mention of my name and how easy it was to come to the Globe, blah, blah, blah. That's something that we've developed and we will continue. That is, I guess, pretty much the 6-month report. It was a great time. I really don't have much more really to say to my 6-month report. It was a good 6 months considering the state of the nation and COVID, etc. And now I guess I shall talk to our statement of intent. So with our statement of intent, I won't say we've gone a little bit boring, but we've looked to the next 3 to 4 years as years of consolidation. The Globe Theatre has been growing over the last 4 or 5 years at a huge rate of knots, and we are aware that at some stage it is going to balance out. I don't think, well, maybe we will, and I could be mistaken, but if we plan for the fact that it's going to balance out at some stage, if it keeps growing, then that's brilliant, and that's easy to adapt to. So over the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to consolidate and just we need to look at what the Globe Theatre needs. We're going to work obviously with council offices with the planned refurbishment of our backstage toilets. You know, seems like a very easy thing to do, but it's an 8-week project. And I can't really close my Globe one for 8 weeks. So we're going to have to work with council officers and see what we can do about that. We're going to look at how we can utilise the limited storage we have at the Globe Theatre, because I've got all these great plans in my head, but a lot of these plans involve having more equipment. So we need to look at how can we utilise the limited space that we have at the Globe Theatre. Because when you bring in new equipment, you've got old equipment. And sometimes you can sell your old equipment, but sometimes you like to keep it because you never know when you might need it again. So it's that kind of balancing. We're going to continue the promotion of the Globe Theatre and all the events we have coming. And one of the ways we're going to do that is we're going to be attending the Women's Lifestyle Expo. Just to try something different, rather than putting adverts on Facebook or adverts on TV or the radio. The Globe is a very welcoming place. I like to consider myself as a very welcoming person, with a big smile as you walk in the door. So I'm hoping I can take that to the Women's Lifestyle Expo and convert all the people that are going to be there to at least spending a couple of seconds and looking at what we have at the Globe and maybe signing up to our newsletter. Because one of our big ways of promoting what we do at the Globe Theatre is through our weekly newsletter. And if people buy tickets over the counter, or if they don't put in their email addresses and things like that, your database just stagnates. So going to the Women's Lifestyle Expo is a potential way to gather 2,000 or 3,000 more names. Yes, half of them may unsubscribe the very first time I send them something, but the other half might go, oh, that's pretty cool. Because we know that there is 90,000 people now in Palmerston North, and I know there's a lot of people who don't realise the shows that we have at the Globe Theatre, and that we're available for hire, for conferences, for weddings, for bar mitzvahs. We can do anything. So it's just trying to get ourselves out there. We will continue to gather feedback from both our hirers and our audience members. This has been discussed at many meetings, and I know Brent likes to ask us how we're doing. We did, over the last couple of weeks, send out another survey to pretty much everybody on our database, and at the moment we're sitting on about a 5% response ratio, which, while not brilliant, considering it's only 5%, it's nearly 200 people have got back to us to say, this is what we like, this is what we don't like about the Globe. So we're just continuing to just find out what people want us to do and how we can get better. I guess that's really my pass over to Margaret.
The only other addition I'd like to make is that the Globe, through Jerry, has been very successful in attracting external funding for some amazing equipment. But the equipment itself will cause us some issues in the next years to come, or in the not too distant future. Currently, we have a very part-time technology person, and we are going to have to look at either increasing his hours if we can, but he's already got a full-time job, or hiring an additional person. The equipment that we have, the technology we have, is incredibly important to the kind of attractions that events and performances that we get. It is an expectation that your equipment is the best and the most up-to-date. So we're good at attracting that kind of funding, but it does raise another issue that the board has to address.
Thank you both. So we will open for questions. I might just take exception to one of your statements, Jerry. You said it was a good 6 months considering. I think we'll just say it was a good 6 months, hey? I wondered if we were talking about the COVID response and how you had to flex. I know you took a slightly different approach with the Fox Houston event. I wonder if you could just explain to us what you had to do there and what impact that had.
Well, it wasn't. It was a sold-out show that we couldn't do in level 2 because it was 196 people. So I had a chat with Michael and Roger. It feels strange to call Michael Houston just Michael and Roger. And we just discussed whether they could do 2 shows in the one day. And then it was just a matter of looking at the audience and pretty much drawing a line down the middle and going, the first 100 that purchased got to the original concert, and the next 100 go to the second concert. But then you have to contact that second 100. And it's not really a good thing, but when you're in the events business, especially when you're a venue, and you ring someone up and say, look, I'm really sorry, but due to COVID, any anger they may have had at you is just gone straight away. And they go, I've got to move you to a 5 o'clock show, does that work? And yeah, I think we lost 14 people out of the whole lot, you know. It was hard work for Roger and Michael. I believe they probably lost on the whole show because obviously they have to pay their staff twice, you know. But I think that's just one of those things. It was the right thing to do. And I think that's what we try and do at the Globe. You know, what is the right thing to do? You know, we've always had the policy that people get a refund straight away. So we don't wait months before you get your money back. If you say you're not going to a certain show because of COVID, give me your bank account and your money's there within a week, you know. So it's just, and I think that's generating that goodwill for people.
And Margaret, you mentioned the successful fundraising that you've been doing. I just wanted to seek a comment from you on, this probably applies to all of the CCOs, how you're seeing the fundraising environment hold up at the moment?
I think that within the next couple of years, there will be some limited funds available because of the limited investment returns that a lot of the trusts will be experiencing. But I think building that relationship, which I'm sure all the CCOs do, with the various trusts, and we're very blessed in the city with the Central Energy Trust, of course, for all our electrical stuff, who are incredibly generous to all the electrical requirements. But I think it's going to get harder. You will have read in the paper that the pokies are going to be illegal soon, and that's another $246 million that will come out of the community funding. I mean, it's a very desirable thing to not have the pokies, but there will be some ramifications, so there'll be lesser funds available. I think it's highly competitive.
Thank you for that. And the same question I've asked to the other CCOs. Are you comfortable with the recommendations that have come through the officer's report for your draft statement of intent?
Yes, we are. I mean, there was a couple of comments about I know last year I did chat with some council officers about our performance measures and maybe just trying to tweak them a little bit. But just, I guess, through staff movement and things like that, it just kind of, and COVID, we never got around to it. So definitely open to talk to council officers at some stage again if they, feel that we need to just, at the time we were talking about result-based accountability, but then with the changes, that just hasn't progressed, which is what is come true in the council officers report. So
that's great. Thank you for that. There are no further questions, so you can step back and we will move to the recommendations on screen. Thank you both. So the usual 3 recommendations there, which I will read out because that's what we do. The committee recommends that the 6-month performance report, 1 July to 31 December 2020, attachment 1, submitted by the Globe Theatre Trust, be received. That the draft statement of intent 2021-24, attachment 3, submitted by the Globe Theatre Trust, be received. That the Globe Theatre Trust is advised of the recommended changes to the final statement of intent 2021-24 outlined in Table 3 of this memorandum titled the Globe Theatre Trust 6-month performance report 1 July to 31 December 2020 and draft statement of intent 2021-24. So I'll move those, seconded by Councillor Barrett. Open that for comment. Councillor Dingwall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say a massive thank you to the Globe and you're all behind me, but to the Globe and the team for the work that you've all done in this space. I feel like I'm actually down at the Globe every couple of days, to be honest. There is a lot going on, and one of the cool things about it is a lot of the shows and things that tend to happen at the Globe are things that have tickets within my price range. And that I really, really appreciate because it's not very often that I can go on a date night with my husband. So we both appreciate that. So thank you.
Excellent. Councillor Johnson.
Well, I'd just like to say thanks very much to the Globe for a great presentation, but also I think Jerry is clearly your secret weapon. And I'd like to confirm that what Jerry said about people thanking him is actually true, because any event I've been to at the Globe, the performers have thanked Jerry for his excellent looking after of them at the end. So it's not just a bit of blather, it's actually the case. And I think you're right, Jerry, actually being welcoming and going the extra mile for people to get them their show up and running, I think is paying off for you. So well done.
Thank you. It falls to me, again, to thank the board and the staff and the volunteers of the Globe, and particularly if you would express to Maxine for us our very great thanks for her many years of service as chair of the board is truly appreciated. As Councillor Dingwall said, I find myself at the Globe quite regularly, most recently for the Manawatu Youth Theatre auditions that were happening on Saturday. And Jerry is not wrong when he says it's chaos. I think they got through about 110 children for auditions, dance and speaking auditions on Saturday. But what I loved was, this might sound a little counterintuitive, but there wasn't a member of staff on site. The Myth are a partner organisation. You operate a high trust model. They have access to the building and they make it work for their community and by extension our community, and it was really lovely to see how that venue was being received as community theatre. Really special. I really wanted to commend you for that. Also for the wraparound service that you provide by not being there. That's amazing. But also, I have been in those occasions where the artists, users of the venue, have gone out of their way to thank your staff for what they've achieved working alongside them in sometimes really difficult situations, and COVID would come into that. I think we're all intrigued, Jerry, by the Lifestyle Expo experiment. And so, be careful out there, is all I can. But I think we're all interested to know what comes from that. It's maybe a new direction, and maybe some of our other CCOs might like to think about if that would work for them, or whether we could partner together to do that kind of thing, because it's not a cheap thing to do, but if it's valuable, then that's interesting and exciting, and I applaud your creative thinking in that regard. So, thank you for everything you do, to all of you. Thank you, and let's put this to the vote. Carried unanimously. Thank you. We will go to the work schedule, and then we will formally close the meeting and go to see Prue's Museum in a Box demonstration. So the last item, item 11, that the Arts, Culture and Heritage Committee receive its work schedule dated April 2021. Any questions on the work schedule? Councillor Dingwall.
I just had a question on number 14 around the review of the 150 celebrations, because I note that in the minutes earlier today it said that that was going to come back to council in August, but now we've decided to push it out further. I was just wondering why.
I think we did talk about putting a date by that, so I would expect that, I do expect that to be August. If not this, it has to be, no, hang on, no, I'm thinking of the wrong one. It'll have to be early 2022 because the 150th programme is all of this year, so we won't be able to review the outcome of that programme until the programme is finished.
I think in the minutes it was actually saying a review of where we're up to for to report to August 2021 in the minutes from earlier today on page 10, which is why I'm asking about it in the work schedule.
Sorry, are you referring to item 10 or item 14? So there's an update on the programme at item 10, which is August 2021. And then there's a review of the programme, which is the wrap-up review, which currently doesn't have a date on it apart from 2022 at item 14.
Right, okay, yes, that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. No, we got there eventually. Thank you, General Manager, Chief Person. No further questions, so I will move that we receive the work schedule. I seek a seconder, which is Councillor Hancock. Thank you. Deputy has disappeared. And I will invite you to vote. Thank you. Carried by the much reduced unanimous number. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Declare this meeting closed. Invite you all to afternoon tea and to have a look at the Museum in a Box.